Please take seats, those who can. Awesome. So, welcome back from lunch. Hopefully that was not too bad. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit about why the platform matters. And it's going to be a little closer to why the platform matters to me. So a little bit about me. Not all of you will know who I am. So I've been around a long time. I started off using Mambo in 4.0. Actually, I think it was 4014. And that's probably 01, 02. Long time ago. And at that point, I was just someone who used it from time to time. I actually installed it for a girlfriend of mine at the time. She had to build a website for the company she worked for. And I found this crazy thing that had these transparent menus, and it was like, oh my God, how can you possibly do it on the web? And then I decided, well, I'd like to do something useful with it, and I was a computer science student, so I figured, let's figure out how we can accept payments online. So I started writing something called Mambo Payment. I never actually released it. I worked with a guy named Mambo Joe, who very few of you might even know who he is, but he was the original creator of Community Builder back a long time ago in the Mambo days. In working on this, I discovered Mambo doesn't support SSL. You could not run, I think it was 450, you could not run it over SSL. So I found out the name of a guy who was one of the core developers, and I kept sending him messages on the forum telling him, you have to fix this, and I never got a response. He had this weird avatar of Master Chief. I had no idea what that was because I never played Halo before. But I kept hounding him, and finally he responded at some point with, just fix it. So I sent him a patch. It was like 3 lines of code. But this is, a long while ago, and I was pretty new. I'd never really done much with open source. And I send in this piece of code. Lo and behold, it's in the next release. One of the most gratifying things that's ever happened to me as a young developer, someone who was trying to figure out his way in the field. Later on, I created the now infamous FTP layer for Joomla 1.5 that hopefully helped some of you install extensions and do all sorts of things, and hosts that didn't support things properly. I was also the one who changed Mambots to plugins. And this also has a funny story. I was announced as a new core team member to Joomla in early 2006, right? But they actually gave me commit access to the tree in December of 2005. And I started playing with the idea that I would do something sort of bigger, right? Because everything up to that point was relatively small, or I'd handed it off to somebody else to commit or things like that. And everybody went on Christmas vacation. All of the Joomla core people went on Christmas vacation. And while they were on vacation, I made 2 commits, revision 1670 and 71, on the 6th of January. And it threw everybody into a tailspin because I touched over 1,000, maybe 1,200 files, renaming Mambots to plugins. And I remember getting a stack of emails as soon as everybody got from vacation. What the hell are you doing? Who are you? A lot of these people didn't even know, we hadn't met, right? Because I was added and they went on vacation, and then I met everybody sort of afterwards. So that was my sort of starting off as a core contributor. Since then, I've actually worn a lot of hats for this project. I've done a lot of things. And one of the things that sort of throughout all of this that's been most gratifying is getting to meet so many of you and talk about all the problems that we have as a community. I don't tend to like doing these sorts of presentations, like the big stuff, because I prefer smaller group setting conversations. And as a shout out for that, not next session, but the one after that, I'm going to be in, I think, room 3, and we're going to talk quite a bit about building scalable applications, application architecture. If you're a developer type and you're interested in this kind of thing, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to have a conversation on how we can really improve the platform and make it better for those sorts of things. Now, on to the reason that we're here. At the summit in Germany, whatever year that was, we came up with the mission for the Joomla project, right? To provide a flexible platform for digital publishing and collaboration. It's very wide open, right? It's all-encompassing. It's very broad. And I actually wasn't even the one in the room coming up with that. I was working on some other problem that we've probably forgotten by now. But this encompasses to me why we're doing what we're doing. I want to build things that allow collaboration. I want to build things that integrate people in the way they work and the way they talk to each other, right? And that is a big piece of the collaboration, the publication, all of that kind of stuff. So what drives me for the platform project is being able to continuously fulfill this in an ever-changing web. Now, as a developer, I, over the years, became very, very frustrated with working on the Joomla CMS, right? It wore me down. Part of it is because so many of you have so many sites out there. It's like making changes to the CMS is sort of like turning an aircraft carrier, right? It's huge, it's massive, there's tons of inertia. There's a relatively limited scope. We're never going to put a shopping cart in the CMS. That's really not what it's for, right? We want to make it so you can add in a shopping cart if you need one, but that's never going to be part of that distribution. So we were never going to build payment plugins, if you will, specifically for the CMS. But me as a developer, I'm always interested in doing more, doing bigger, doing new things, learning new things. I'm not always, I don't want to just continuously work on a content creation workflow. There are those who do, and that's awesome. But for me, this wasn't what drove me. This wasn't what got me interested. Again, I started working on Mambo Payment. It was something a little different, a little adjacent. I've worked on lots of things over the years. But very few of the things that actually drove me were things that made sense for the core distribution of the CMS, right? Now, the slow rate of change is actually fantastic for stability, for all the people building things on top of it. But for someone like me, it's not inspiring. It's not what is going to keep me continuously involved in the project. It's not what's going to keep people like me continuously coming to push the envelope and find new ways to innovate. So, put that in context with the fact that the web is constantly changing, right? There are constantly new things coming out. It's actually hard just to keep up with all the new things that are coming out if you're not even developing. Just reading the stuff sometimes is overwhelming, right? Everyone used to need their own site. Back when Mambo was released and in Joomla 1.0, you still had a situation where small mom and pop shops needed their own web presence, their own website to function, right? To have an online presence. Nowadays, people can have Facebook pages. People can have any number of like Yelp pages, right? And you tend to go where your customers are just as much as you have your own web presence. In a lot of cases, the engagement that you get there is just as powerful, if not more. Because this shift to all of these social platforms and all of the sort of centralized things, it started making me think about, okay, well, if I'm going to stay a web developer, what kind of things is it that I need to build? What do I need to be thinking about? What's next, right? And many people have quoted me as saying that the CMS is dead. The Joomla CMS is by no means dead. It's a strong, thriving ecosystem. But for someone like me, it's dead to me. I'm no longer interested in it. And some of you may strongly disagree. Some of you may agree. But it's not something that I'm going to go out and drive. That doesn't mean that I can't build things that would be beneficial to the CMS or to the people building on the CMS. And that's a big part of why we started the platform project. It is, for me, everything is about services, web services. So in the web of now, not even tomorrow, you need to be able to integrate with mobile devices. You need to have a strategy for dealing with desktop applications in certain senses. You need other people to be able to integrate into what your system does, right? And obviously, you need to seamlessly connect to these social platforms because they are obviously not going anywhere. So to do that effectively, you really must have a service-first mentality, at least for me. So everything that we've done with the platform since separating it, from my point of view, has been a step towards putting services first, making sure that all of the things that we build make it easier and easier and easier for us to both consume web services as well as expose web services, so that you can have an application. Let's take the example, let's say that you have a company that owns a few golf courses, right? Used to be you would have your own website out there, and maybe you pay a developer to build a thing to schedule tee times, right? So there's this whole deal where you can reserve and maybe even pay online. Well, in today's internet, it's probably better for you to instead have a Facebook app. Because if 2 or 3 people will get together and decide they want to go golfing, very few people go golfing on their own, at least none of the people that I know, right? You go with friends. It's part of what makes it cool, because the rest of it's very boring. Unless you're in California, the weather's great. But so if you had a Facebook app, right, that allowed me to say, hey, Kyle, let's go golfing. Probably never golfed in your life. But if he did, then he could accept it, right? And it could be something where it's integrated with services that we put together for this golf course company, theoretically, right? And you can schedule tee times there, and it all goes back into a centralized system. You don't even need a web presence, because on Facebook, everybody can connect together, everybody can already do those things. You don't have to put up that front. You could additionally have a mobile app that does the same kind of things. It touches the same exact services, right? Desktop apps, that would be weird, whatever. The integrating with you is also incredibly important. If I have a business, I want to allow and enable other people. In fact, I want to embrace other people building applications that can integrate with me. You sell for me. Let me make it easier for you, right? There's lots of different ways you can think about this. So for me, services coming first is critical going forward. It's how I'm thinking about all these things. And what I'm hoping is the things that we do in the platform can sort of percolate up into changes into the CMS going forward. So, with Service First, what have we done? So, what this is attempting to describe are, these are new things that we've done in the platform over the last year and a half, right? These are things that we've really rethought, reimagined, and built in a way that it all sort of ties together and makes it easy to build a service application. So we created a class called JApplication Web, which replaces JApplication. Some of you may have heard of it, some of you may be scared of it. But what it's really trying to do is simplify the encapsulation of a web app and really make it easy to build them, decouple it from all of the other things that are in the CMS, right? So like the existing application class had this menu object, had these crazy router objects that are just nuts, honestly. They're tied to the menu system, they're tied to item ID, they're tied to all these things that make developers cry. So we created a simplified version, right? And then after that, we created a whole new router. And this router is based on conventions. It's based on the same types of things that Rails developers know. It's based on the same types of things that Backbone.js developers know. Any of these things where you have just a simple route pattern mapped to a controller. It's very, very simple. There's none of this complexity of, well, first we look up the menu item, figure out what component it is, and then see if we can pass that through to some other thing, and some magic happens, and then a method gets executed, right? It's very, very crisp. It's very, very easy to understand where these mappings go. We also created an input object, and that replaces JRequest in this world. The input object is actually really, really easy to interact with. It's got a little magic in it, but the gist of it is it's an actual object you can pass around. And that's really critical because the next piece is our brand new MVC. And we built this to be very, very simple. They're meant to be atomic. Each controller does a thing. It doesn't do 15 things, it does a thing. And what's beautiful about that is when you have a thing, you can chain those things and create a hierarchy to it. You can fire off a workflow by executing one controller that just chains all the rest of them off. And what it'll do is it'll pass this input object instead of having one static set of input variables in one place. so that it can be manipulated along the way. You can create new ones, you can do any number of things, and it's very isolated, so that each controller has an understanding of what it's supposed to do. The last piece of this puzzle is the HTTP client that we added, and that is principally so that you can go off and consume all these other web services. You can build things on top of it, right? So there's the input part, and then there's the output part. So that's what we've done there. Now, over the course of the time that I've been working on Joomla, I got a lot of code that I've written. There's a ton of it, and it's all over the place, and it's never had a home. Until the platform project, I had written a class to create a command line application, right? Just in the terminal, type what you're going to do. That never would see the light of day. There's no way that would ever enter the CMS world that existed before, right? A daemon class, my goodness, can you imagine somebody coming to the CMS mailing list 3 years ago and saying, so I'd like to create a Joomla daemon, right? People would laugh. It's just, it's laughable. It's not something that you would do. You might find uses for it, but it would never fit in the core distribution. Payment libraries, shipping libraries, OpenTaps integration that I did for a project. OpenTaps is a top-level Apache project it's built on a top-level Apache project. It's ERP. It's huge business ERP solution, right? They have a service API. Why wouldn't we want to have something to do that? Why wouldn't somebody who wants to build large-scale Joomla sites, large-scale integrations, want to have that just readily available to them? Yes, we can integrate with that. But the CMS has no purpose for that, no place for it. MusicBrainz is actually a very funny one. The very first command line application that I wrote for Joomla when I was tinkering was, I used to have all these MP3s that I just happened upon. And I wanted to organize them, right? Because as I acquired them, they weren't all uniform in the way they were named or the way they were tagged or anything like that. Nothing to do with how I got them. So I wrote this thing that connects with MusicBrainz. Now, MusicBrainz is a service that essentially tags and gives you like information about all the MP3s, right? So I wrote this thing, and all it does is iterate over a folder recursively. It looks deep. And it goes through and it finds all the songs, and it tags them using this API and renames them. Made my life easy, because otherwise you sit in one of those really poorly written Windows apps that just go click, yes, click, and save, right? It's miserable. WebDAV, I did that a long time ago as well. Never did anything with it. It didn't really belong. There was no consensus around why we would do anything like that. That's not the focus of the CMS. There are all these other big improvements and problems that we have to solve before we get into the little things like this. Ping and trackback, blah. Like, so much of this stuff, it didn't have a place. But with the platform project, what we set out to do was say, you know what? We're going to broaden what we do. It's not going to be focused on just the CMS as we know it. We're going to focus on bigger, bolder ideas. And we want to have a commons. We want to have a place where I can work together with somebody like Nick on a payment solution problem, right? How many extensions are on the JED that accept payment? How many implementations of a PayPal API do you think we have on the JED, right? How many of them actually work? Those numbers are all large, but if we all work together, then those numbers would shrink. If there was a common place where anybody who wanted to build anything that connected to PayPal's API, shameless plug, it would be easy because there's a well-documented, well-structured, well-tested, everybody uses an API for that. Then, those of you who are building extensions or sites can focus on what actually is the differentiator for you. You don't have to worry about the basics. The basics we have covered. You just worry about what matters to you. So, what's new and upcoming? We got several things going on. Whiz bang. Keychain was just added to the platform. This one is strange. This one would never have made it into the platform, to the CMS. Never, ever. But it's something we used here at eBay, thought it might be neat, and submitted it. Here's all it is. Any of you who know what JRegistry is, it's basically an object that you can just hierarchically store information, right? It's a nested object. That's all that it is. But it gives you a very nice way to serialize that, and it gives you a very nice way to get and store things, right? So all we did was extend that and put encryption on top of it. So when you serialize it and store it, it's encrypted using SSL. That's it. That's all it is. Very simple idea. But what it allows for is you can store sensitive information on the server if you want to, because you can encrypt it. And we use it for some system passwords. Obviously not the most sensitive things, right? But if you've got a set of credentials to connect to a secondary system, you don't want to store that in clear text, just in case. This gives you that possibility. Very, very basic. And it might be like 200 lines of code, tops. GitHub. So we created, actually Ian started this, a GitHub library that connects to the entirety of the GitHub web services. And it allows us to edit, create, delete, pull requests, issues, milestones, any number of things, right? And you might think, well, the CMS would obviously never use that. That's useless. But we've already found a use for it. We have this cool little application we use in the platform called the pull request tester. And what that does is every time somebody submits a pull request, we catch that. And then we run a series of automated tests over it to make sure it's okay. We check, make sure that you adhere to our style guides. We check to make sure all the unit tests run. And then we can store those results, right? This library, this package in the platform allows us to do that very, very easily. And any of you who want to write anything else that connects with GitHub can easily leverage that. There's a team working on a tracker tool for the CMS that's leveraging the same exact code. The rest of these are all summer of code projects. JMediaWiki was submitted as a platform pull request probably longer ago than I'm willing to admit. But as we review that and work through it and make sure that it's up to speed, we'll get that merged in, and then any of you who are building things will be able to immediately interact with MediaWiki. And that would, to some extent, include Wikipedia, right? There are APIs to interact with all of these things and very easily work with them. Google. Aaron, I forget his last name. Elon Schmitz did a fantastic piece of work on our Google package. This thing is immense, guys. You can interact with Picasa, you can interact with Google+, you can interact with Maps, you can interact with Google Analytics, all sorts of stuff. This package is killer. There's more to do, but it's awesome already. And the fact is, there are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of extensions on the JED or in your personal projects that interact with Google in one way, shape, or form, and probably more that would like to. This will make that easier. That's already in the platform today. Facebook, same thing. And because of those, we've added OAuth clients, which just makes it that much easier to interact with services, right? Again, service first. Pretty much all of these, except for Keychain, though you could use that for storing service credentials, are all centered around web services. They're all centered around interacting with these other pools of information and places where people go on the web, right? You want to touch that. You want to get involved in that, and you want to be able to integrate with it so that you can raise engagement both on your system as well as interact directly on theirs. So, with that, I want all of us to innovate together on the platform. Come join us. Think of cool ideas. Work on them. And that's all I had to share with you guys.